Welcome to Africa Geotrends, your window into Africa's power, progress, and geopolitics. Asterisk before we dive in, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the stories shaping Africa's future. Africa is quietly rewriting one of the world's oldest scripts, the story of trade, borders, and custom barriers, by building what could become the first truly unified digital customs system on a continental scale. Across dozens of African nations, governments, technology firms, and regional bodies are coordinating to dismantle decades of inefficient border bureaucracy. In its place, they are laying the foundation for a seamless, digitized trade infrastructure that promises to change how goods, people, and capital flow across Africa forever. What began as scattered pilot schemes is now morphing into a bold, continent-wide initiative. The stakes are enormous: economic sovereignty, regional integration, and a rebalancing of global trade power. For centuries, African trade across borders has been plagued by delays, corruption, overlapping regulations, and inconsistent enforcement. Every shipment that crossed from Nigeria into Ghana, Kenya into Uganda, or Morocco into Algeria risked unpredictable delays. Clearance could take days. Paperwork piled up. Bribes sometimes followed. Tariffs and non-tariff barriers added cost. For small businesses and ordinary citizens, intra-African commerce often meant heartbreak. Potential profits erased by time, uncertainty, or outright theft. Meanwhile, foreign exporters and importers capitalized on formal trade channels, leaving Africa's internal market fragmented and underdeveloped. In 2023, the atmosphere began to shift. A coalition of trade ministers from across the continent convened under the auspices of the African Union, AU, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA, Secretariat. Their directive was ambitious but simple: unify customs rules, digitize customs clearance, and create a trusted shared system to replace national silos. It sounded like a futuristic dream, but pressure from a younger generation, Pan-African startups, and global supply chain disruptions caused by pandemics and geopolitical shocks made it urgent. Africa could no longer afford delays. The world was changing fast. Africa's trade had to evolve too. The first pilot nations included Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Ghana, and Morocco. Under a coordinated plan, these countries harmonized tariff classifications, cleared cross-border documentary redundancies, and established interoperable customs databases. Cargo codes, shipping manifests, certificates of origin, and clearance permits were shifted into a shared cloud-based digital infrastructure. For traders, this meant no more opaque paperwork, no more inconsistent leaps across borders with unpredictable delays. Instead, clearance could be pre-managed, permits verified electronically, and customs protocols standardized. In Nairobi, a shipping firm that previously needed 5 separate clearances and 3 weeks to move garments across East African borders completed the same journey in under 48 hours under the new system. Scan manifests, digital approvals, RFID-tagged containers moving on cleared routes. The transformation was dramatic. For the first time, cross-border African trade was beginning to resemble advanced global supply chains. The ripple effect reached far beyond a single shipment. Confidence, reliability, predictability, qualities once taken for granted by foreign investors, began to return to African markets. As the pilot expanded, regional hubs emerged. In Accra, Ghana's Customs Division unveiled a digital dashboard showing real-time volumes of goods moving north to Burkina Faso, west to Côte d'Ivoire, and south to Nigeria. At the same time, coastal ports in Lagos, Durban, and Mombasa started experimenting with inbound container tagging, automated tariff calculation, and digital release orders after payments cleared via regional banking integration. Suddenly, quality data on intra-African trade flows started to accumulate. For the first time, African economists could measure value chains within the continent, not just export records to foreign markets. This emerging customs architecture also offered a major strategic advantage: transparency. Where million-dollar deals once moved unseen through manual processes, digital logs created traceability. Cargo manifests, release orders, duty payments, and certificate of origin records were time-stamped and immutable, protected by encryption and audit trails. This dramatically reduced opportunities for corruption and smuggling. It also allowed governments to track trade flows, enforce regulations fairly, and collect accurate revenue, all while offering exporters and importers a predictable, reliable system. The benefits became visible quickly. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, long shut out of cross-border commerce due to paperwork burdens, began to export goods across regions. Agricultural producers in Uganda started shipping coffee directly to South Africa. Textile manufacturers in Ethiopia found buyers in Kenya and Tanzania. Spare parts suppliers in Nigeria began selling products to manufacturers in Ghana and Senegal. These were trades that previously would have stumbled over tariffs, permits, and delays. Now they flowed through digital lanes. For consumers, this meant more variety at lower cost. Products that once had to be imported from abroad could now be sourced regionally. African goods became competitive. Value stayed within the continent. Local producers gained new markets. The economic repercussions rippled outward. Regional supply chains started to emerge. Cables from South Africa powering farms in East Africa, processed cocoa from Ghana reaching markets in West Africa, mobile parts assembled in Kenya being sold in Nigeria. As momentum built, the African Union and AfCFTA leadership proposed scaling the system continent-wide by 2028. A blueprint was drafted, a shared customs clearance portal, regional digital infrastructure funded through a combination of African development banks, and private investment, common training and certification for customs officers, shared cybersecurity protocols, transparent tariff harmonization, and dispute resolution mechanisms accessible from any participating capital. If fully implemented, this would eliminate most non-tariff barriers, reduce clearance times continent-wide by up to 70%, and increase intra-African trade fourfold within a decade. For Africa, this meant economic sovereignty and structural transformation. For the global economy, this meant a new center of integrated trade. The plan had ripple effects beyond trade. Governments began to see digital customs infrastructure as critical to national security, economic forecasting, and integration into global supply chains. Real-time trade data became a tool for planning manufacturing zones, industrial parks, energy supply corridors, and logistics hubs. Investors started factoring in African internal markets as not just raw material suppliers, but as integrated consumer and production platforms. Multinational companies began to explore African-based factories with regional distribution, attracted by reduced logistical friction and growing continental demand. Africa stopped being just a resource outpost. It became a viable internal supply chain. Meanwhile, youth-led tech companies seized the opportunity. Startups emerged offering services like digital freight forwarding, customs paperwork automation, supply chain financing, logistics analytics, and regional e-commerce distribution networks. African fintech firms developed cross-border payment platforms integrated with the customs system so that once goods cleared digitally, payments settled instantly across currencies, eliminating previous foreign exchange delays. Warehousing startups expanded to serve regional inventory demands. Logistics firms optimized continental haulage routes based on real-time flow data. A new African trade tech ecosystem was rising. International reactions came quickly. In trade forums, European, American, and Asian trading blocs observed Africa's unified customs experiment with a mix of interest and concern. Some called it a bold leap forward, a model that could reduce global trade friction. Others warned of protectionism, disruption of existing supply chains, and potential challenges to long-established trade dependencies. But for many African nations, the value was clear: control over how trade happens, who benefits, and where value is created. There were skeptics. Critics pointed to the gaps: inconsistent electricity supply in some countries, limited digital infrastructure in remote regions, corruption risks shifting from paperwork to digital control, digital literacy barriers, and the possibility of exclusion for informal traders who lacked registration. These were serious challenges. Implementing a digital customs system across 1.4 billion people and 54 nations would not be easy. The digital divide, connectivity gaps, regulatory divergence, resource disparities, all threatened to undermine the ambition. But supporters argued the challenges were surmountable. Pan-African institutions, regional development banks, and a growing pool of local tech talent offered solutions. Investments into fiber optic infrastructure, renewable energy mini-grids, mobile connectivity, and digital literacy programs were ramping up. Pilot programs demonstrated that even small border crossings could be upgraded with solar-powered clearance kiosks linked to the central customs portal. Local governments began to invest in training and compliance workshops. Civil society organizations used digital tools for transparency, oversight, and feedback. Slowly but steadily, capacity was being built. By 2025, initial data from the pilot group of countries showed promising signs. Cross-border transit times dropped by more than 60%. Revenue leakages decreased significantly. Reported smuggling and corruption at border posts went down by 40 to 50%. In some cases, small traders who previously never dared attempt cross-border trade registered legally and began exporting goods at scale. The boost in legitimate trade across Africa began to show up in economic growth indicators, regional investment inflows, and increased industrial activity. As more countries joined the system, regional trade corridors solidified. The Abidjan-Lagos corridor started handling electronics from Nigeria destined for West and Central Africa. The Nairobi-Dar es Salaam line began transporting agricultural produce from East Africa to the Indian Ocean for export and regional distribution. North-South corridors through the Sahara started becoming viable again for processed goods, thanks to improved customs processing and digital clearance. Logistics bottlenecks eased. Time to market shortened. African goods began competing within Africa, not just abroad. The new customs infrastructure also opened the door for continental value chains. For example, raw minerals from the Congo could be transported quickly and legally to smelters in South Africa. Processed metals could then be shipped onward to manufacturing hubs in Kenya or Egypt for electronics or automotive parts. Finished goods could move across borders with minimal friction. This raised the possibility that entire manufacturing and assembly value chains, long absent from African economies, could re-emerge. Africa could become more than a supplier of raw materials. It could become a hub of production, innovation, and regional commerce. The geopolitical implications are profound. Global powers that once relied on abrupt supply lines may now need to renegotiate with a united African trade platform. Import-export markets change. Supply chain strategies pivot. Global trade routes may shift. Instead of fragmented bilateral deals, the world may now encounter a unified African market, capable of influencing global prices, supply stability, and trade norms. For Africa, this is leverage. For outside powers, this is a redefinition of dependencies. Beyond economics, the unified customs system carries symbolic weight. It represents a shift in mindset, from scattered national markets to a shared continental vision, from external dependency to internal empowerment, from a patchwork of weak borders to a coordinated, digital, sovereign network. For many Africans, it becomes a statement. The continent can solve its own problems, build its own institutions, and claim its rightful place in global commerce on its own terms. Of course, the journey will not be smooth. Implementation issues will arise. Political changes may slow reforms in some countries. Cybersecurity threats may attempt to exploit the new system. Informal trade networks may resist or adapt unpredictably. Infrastructure gaps, funding shortages, and capacity limitations remain real. But the direction is set. The alliance of tech innovators, political leaders, investors, and civil society has proven that a unified customs system is not just idealistic. It is feasible, beneficial, and increasingly vital. Africa is waking up to its own potential. As the digital customs system expands, the continent gains more than faster clearance or easier trade. It gains autonomy, stability, cooperation, and power. It reshapes not only its internal economy, but its external relationships. It becomes a player capable of influencing global trade dynamics. It becomes a competitor for manufacturing, supply chains, digital infrastructure, and economic growth. In the coming years, if the vision holds, Africa could move from being a marginal actor in global supply chains to being a central hub, not just for raw resources, but for real trade, real production, real logistics, and real economic integration. This digital customs revolution may be remembered not as a technical upgrade, but as the moment Africa regained control over its borders, its trade, and its future. The world is watching, but Africa is leading. You've been watching Africa Geo Trends, where Africa's moves shape the world. If you haven't already, subscribe now and stay ahead of the next big story.